Okay, we're finally covering another Valiant comic today. Well, sort of. I mean, alright, this is going to get a little complicated.
Valiant Comics was founded in 1989 by former Marvel Comics editor-in-chief Jim Shooter after a failed attempt to purchase Marvel. Shooter gathered a group of investors along with a major contribution from venture capital firm Triumph Capital. However, in 1992, Shooter discovered that his chief partner, Stephen J. Mazowski, was stripping the CEO of Triumph Capital, and the two were pushing Shooter out of the company in order to then sell it for a tidy payoff.
A buyer was found in 1994 when Valiant was purchased by Acclaim Entertainment, a video game publisher best known for a bunch of terrible Simpsons games, as well as home console ports of arcade classics like Mortal Kombat and NBA Jam.
Acclaim did manage to keep Valiant afloat for a number of years, just long enough to launch a successful first-person shooter franchise based on the property Turok Son of Stone, before ending publication somewhere around the turn of the millennium and closing everything down in 2004 after a fiasco involving a game called BMX XXX.
Valiant's assets were purchased in 2005, with the company eventually resuming publication in 2012. Which brings us to the series we're covering today. Quantum and Woody was originally published in 1997 for Acclaim Comics, which means we are covering a book now published by Valiant, which was originally published by Acclaim, which used to be Valiant. Are you confused yet?
Quantum and Woody came about when editor Fabian Nicieza contacted writer Christopher Priest about doing a buddy action comic in the vein of the old Power Man and Iron Fist series that Marvel put out in the 70s, i.e. a comic following two people who were the best of friends save for the tiny fact that they couldn't actually stand each other. Priest, not to be confused with the British science fiction author, enlisted the talents of former Power Man and Iron Fist artist Mark Bright to work on this new book, and the two began drawing inspiration from such buddy action comedies as Lethal Weapon and White Men Can't Jump.
Today we're looking at the first 8 issues alongside a few supplemental stories of the original Quantum and Woody, in a volume simply titled Clang!
Detective Joe Tomorrow sits down with two costume crime fighters, one in full costume which should be called Quantum, though everyone easily recognizes him as Eric Henderson. His partner, with no nom de plume at all, is Woodrow Van Shelton, or Woody for short. Both Eric and Woody are offspring of business executives of a government think tank called Affirm Research, and they were close throughout much of their youth. Eric was a straight-laced do-gooder, often feeling responsible for being a good role model to African Americans, while Woody was a troublemaker, leading Eric into situations involving drugged-up guard dogs and peeping on a mutual love interest named Amy Fishbane. That changed in high school when Woody's parents divorced and he moved back to the Bronx to live with his mother, though not before leaving Eric with a very choice message.
Basically, Woody dropped an N-bomb and Eric didn't take too kindly to it, and no, I'm not going to show the offending panel because I don't want to get in trouble. Also, Woody was cut off financially from his father at the behest of his gold-digging mother.
The two wouldn't see each other again until both of their fathers were killed in a mysterious helicopter crash. In fact, this was actually where they first encountered Detective Tomorrow, who was investigating the crash and found it very convenient that both men were on that chopper. Realizing that the detective believes both the men are suspects, Eric's interest is piqued and he ropes Woody into investigating Affirm Research and its chief scientist, David Warrant.
Also, Woody has almost no access to his father's estate, which is to be trickled out to him over the next 24 years by the state's executor, who is, of course, Eric.
As they tail Warrant, Eric and Woody get into a heated argument over a pair of energy gauntlets that were in Mr. Henderson's possession when he died. Eventually, the two settle on one person each getting a gauntlet. Finally, the two follow Warrant into the Affirm Research facility, where they enter a room containing an experimental electromagnetic field generator, which, thanks to Woody's shenanigans, leads to another fight breaking out and seemingly tripping the generator and starting up a non-stop CD of the Village People's greatest hits. The two tussled into the generator field chamber until they realized there was no way for them to escape without working together. It's then that they spot David Warrant appearing to fully power the generator just as their bodies begin disintegrating and then leading to another fight between the two guys. The next thing Eric and Woody know, Detective Joe Tomorrow is standing over them explaining that the Affirm Research facility exploded and David Warrant is nowhere to be found.
And this is effectively the big hook for this series. Eric, aka Quantum, and Woody must clang their gauntlets together once every 24 hours in order to maintain a tangible physical presence here on Earth, lest they dissipate into being pure energy. Now this means they are effectively tethered together, not entirely dissimilar from the original buddy action comedy, 1958's The Defiant One, starring Sidney Poitier and Tony Curtis.
Woody initially appears enthusiastic with the idea of being a costume crime fighter and helping everyday people, until he gets a glimpse of Eric in his new Quantum outfit. Woody, on the other hand, just settles for being maskless, carrying a gun and a Zippo lighter. The two set out on their first case, investigating the murder of Mrs. Ed Palmer, a suspected mafia accountant. The cops, because it's kind of their job, suspect Palmer of being the one who killed his wife, but Quantum isn't so sure given the mafia ties involved. So he and Woody begin to track down Frank Marshall's address and begin scaling the wall of the apartment building.
Couldn't we maybe have taken the elevator?
However, the two wind up being thwarted by two kids armed with super soakers. As they dangle from the side of the building, this brings the attention of the police, who think Quantum and Woody are trying to unalive themselves.
Basically, this is the main reason why the two have been talking back and forth relating their story to Detective Tomorrow.
The two would eventually return to Marshall's apartment, with Quantum continuing to scale the building and Woody taking the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles' advice and just hopping on the elevator. From there, Quantum expects a cache of weapons while Woody cues up The Empire Strikes Back on the big screen. Quantum finds what he believes to be a phosphorus dye on one of the guns, only for Woody to discern that it's just cherry Kool-Aid.
Oh yeah!
This is interrupted by the arrival of Frank Marshall, who does in fact confirm that it's just Kool-Aid. Also, yes, he did try to place a phone call to Ed Palmer, but it was the wrong Ed Palmer that he called. This person who killed his wife is not his accountant. That being said, Quantum is still determined to prove that Ed Palmer did not kill his wife, and to prove it, he tracks down the Kool-Aid analysis to Malaysia and a monastery where occupants have taken a vow of silence. However, Woody has procured a goat which he holds hostage in front of the monks in order to get them to spoil who it is behind this whole gun racket.
Vincent Van Gogh eventually goes on to become the breakout character of this series. Yes, they named the goat Vincent Van Gogh.
The monks point Quantum, Woody, and Vincent towards the headquarters of Marshall's top client, Terrence Magnum. Scaling the side of the mountain to the compound, however, proves to be a little too obvious, as the duo need to fight off a massive helicopter attack. The two eventually do make it to Magnum's office, only to find that he's cleared out. However, Quantum turns up an Egyptian dagger, sending him and Woody to the African nation to get the writing on the hilt translated. It's mostly gibberish, save for the part of the hieroglyphs that reads "Made in Taiwan."
Yeah, this book is really hard to read with a straight face.
Quantum and Woody finally manage to confront Magnum at his Taiwanese headquarters. However, Magnum turns himself without even knowing what exactly it is he's being questioned about. That is, except for Ed Palmer's wife, he doesn't know anything about that. We then jump to the present, where Detective Tomorrow explains that most of the evidence does point to the fact that Ed Palmer killed his wife, and these two have just wasted hundreds of thousands of dollars on mostly nothing, save for a circuit board that was being used in an electronic spying operation.
From here, Quantum and Woody go on to break the fourth wall at the behest of Editor-in-Chief Fabian Nicieza to apologize for the use of the N-word earlier, promising that from here on out they're going to replace it with the word noogie.
Moving on, Quantum and Woody decide to take down a mall holdup, Blues Brothers style, which ends with Woody shooting a hostage with a squib bullet, and then heading to Sam Goody to buy the new REM album. The two manage to eke out a living as Woody continuously annoys Eric by blasting a song he wrote called Medicine Woman. It doesn't help that when the neighbors stop by to complain, they eventually wind up joining in. This even begins affecting the crime fighting, as Quantum mistakes a homeless man named Willie May, who just happens to be an old acquaintance of Woody's, for a thief. Finally, Eric snaps and demands Woody just give him some personal space before suddenly vanishing in a cloud of smoke.
From here, we get a brief vignette seeing Eric and Woody as senior citizens and discovering that they could have just removed the gauntlets with a snap the whole time.
Quantum and Woody eventually patch things up and prepare to take on a security detail at the United Nations in New York City. They've even managed to enlist a third member in the form of high school sweetheart Amy Fishbane. When a group of terrorists invade looking to assassinate an ambassador, Quantum and Woody make quick work of the bad guys. Naturally, this just all turned out to be a dream, as Quantum is really unconscious in an alley after falling off the roof he left Woody on. Woody enlists the aid of a passerby named Batman to revive Quantum and explains what happened. Apparently, while they were arguing on the rooftop, Woody inadvertently struck a nearby pipe, which activated a mysterious ability in his gauntlet. Namely, the fact that it can now fire a plasma blast, which Woody demonstrates by blowing up Batman's cart. Before Batman can engage in some cudgel-based revenge, Detective Tomorrow comes by looking for help. The police have recognized that Quantum does seem to have some elite tracking abilities, and need assistance trying to locate a crack mother who abducted her newborn from an incubator at the hospital.
And now the humor has come to a screeching halt.
Quantum immediately goes into action, using a special gas to follow a woman's footprints to a nearby movie theater where several patrons are calling the cops over the crying baby. But Quantum manages to get the woman to turn the baby over and get it back to the incubator in due time. That being said, things aren't exactly peachy keen, as Eric must still wake up every morning to the strains of Medicine Woman. Still, he and Woody have managed to develop something of a routine, clanging their gauntlets every 12 hours just to be on the safe side. That is until one morning when Eric finds Woody's bed empty. They only have about 13 hours left, and the only one to respond to Eric's calling is Taylor, the former Batman, who had to change his name after DC sent a cease and desist letter. Taylor is there to ask for a job after the two heroes had blown up a bunch of his stuff with that shopping cart incident. The youngster does seem to have some computer abilities, so Quantum enlists his aid in trying to track down Woody and the most likely suspect who took him, David Warrant.
Basically, Eric doesn't think that Warrant is really dead. After all, there wasn't a body found after the explosion, and, well, this is a comic book. But the fact of the matter is, even if Warrant is alive, he actually doesn't have Woody. Woody is having to take a side job passing out flyers for a toy store chain.
With only an hour to spare, Eric visits the home of Warrant's mother Eloise to rummage through David's personal effects, with the only problem being is that someone forgot to mention to Eloise that David died.
I don't know if Eloise has some form of dementia or if the people at Affirm Research are really just that stupid.
Eloise's hysterical crying brings a woman named Holly, who Eric tries to explain what happened only to suddenly be knocked out by a cookie sheet. Eric comes to in David's bedroom, and with only 3 minutes to spare, he manages to spot a pair of similar-looking gauntlets and tries clanging his against one of them. It manages to halt his disintegration, but it also somehow winds up reviving David Warrant.
The clanging of the third-party gauntlet has also affected Woody as well, as he's allowed to remain solid.
Eric blasts Warren, who only begs for help when questioned about Woody. The noise eventually brings Eloise and Holly, with the latter tossing the control gauntlets to David, who fully manages to reconstitute himself. Unfortunately, all the ruckus has caused Eloise to suffer a heart attack, forcing David to have to carry her to the hospital. After being left behind, Holly decks Eric, but then later tries to explain things.
Holly was David Warrent's instructor at SUNY Stony Brook, and later his girlfriend and assistant at Affirm Research. She explains to Eric that the field generator basically rearranged the molecules of Eric, Woody, and David Warrant. However, because of that, the rearrangement is going to wear those molecules out over time, meaning it's going to be harder and harder for the trio to constantly reconstitute themselves. So it's highly unlikely that David Warrant intentionally turned on the machine, meaning that it would probably kill him as well. And that concludes Quantum and Woody, Volume 1, Clang. How was it? Well, I do think there's some really top-notch humor in this book. There's a lot of great banter between the characters, and the humor is such that you don't have to constantly stop and explain the jokes, which means it works on just about every level, and that's all coupled with some really nice artwork. Now, if there is a real big drawback to the humor, it's that it is very much of its time. There is a running thread throughout this book where Woody is constantly denying that he and Eric are a gay couple. That's stuff you get away with in 1997 that obviously really doesn't fly in 2022. Also, early on in the book, there's a lot of bouncing back and forth through the narrative. It's just really kind of jumbled, and it's kind of hard to get it into a coherent story. Like, reading it is okay, but obviously summarizing it for the show, it got really hard. So, yeah, if it sometimes seems like everything's out of place, that's kind of because it is. Also, again, this is kind of a little nitpick, but still, the fact that Mrs. Warrant was not informed of her son's death, apparently, even though this was like months after that happened, it's just, again, kind of a really big, stupid plot hole, don't you think? I mean, it's either she has some form of dementia, or Affirm Research is really that cold and stupid. Yeah, it's just kind of a dangling thread that just doesn't make much sense. Still, though, this is an entirely enjoyable book, and if you can accept the fact this is humor from 1997, you are probably going to enjoy it. I am going to give Quantum and Woody Volume 1, Clang, a B. And with that, we'll see what we'll be doing next time on the Random Trade Review.
Remember, you can help support my channel at patreon.com/sleepytimeforcatproductions. There, you can request a trade to be put in the randomizer, aka the cardboard box. Also, remember, like, comment, share, subscribe, and ring that notification bell.